Okay, welcome to Faith and Calm. This is class number 249. We are headed into Pesach. I guess we will have a class next week. I think that's let's see, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday. No, I don't think so. I don't think we can do that. So stay tuned. I don't think we are.
Yontiv's last day of Yontiv's Monday.
Last day of Monday is also Monday, so we may not be back here for 3 weeks. So apologies there, but it's just the way things work out. So let's get ready for Passover. So one of the main things that everybody knows about Passover is you eat matzah. And, but why do we eat matzah? And what is it that we accomplish by eating matzah? And why is this just a central thing? I thought the story was mainly to talk about going out of Egypt, going out of bondage and going into freedom. But matzah is very integral to the whole thing. And sometimes we really don't think about this and we don't understand what the significance of matzah is. And of course, when you go into the history of the matzah, that's also an interesting thing. The Jews until recent times, the experience of eating matzah was quite, well, at least in the time of the temple, was pretty good. Unleavened bread does not have to be crunchy and baked in, like it is today. It sort of like was a laffa, like a pita and so forth like that. And then they had lamb because that was the Paschal lamb. So they put it inside. So now you're making like a gyro. And then you had some barbecue sauce, which is called horseradish, but which is much better than normal barbecue sauce. So, when Hillel made his sandwich, it was probably a nice sandwich. We don't have that for some reason. Partly is because the ability to do it, to make matzah that way, only the Yemenites do it that way, because once it started becoming factories in the 1700s and so forth, they had to go quicker and faster. And so they were worried about the chametz. So now we have this toasty, crispy thing that's called matzah. But let's go into the matzah business. So the Gemara, matzah is made out of wheat. And there's an interesting thing that Gemara says about the wheat, and it says that a child does not know how to say mother or father, mama or papa, until they start tasting wheat. Okay, actually, biologically, they found out recently that that's actually sort of true. When you start eating solid foods, something changes with the larynx and the cheeks and so forth, and the baby becomes able to articulate those words. And until then, they're not able to do it. But there's a deeper meaning and a deeper idea, and it's related to matzah because matzah is made out of wheat, and why wheat is, and this matzah actually inculcates the ability to recognize something. And and I'm going to explain something from the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. I read it over myself. I didn't just listen to somebody talking about it. And he brings the quote from the Gemara and from the Zohar, especially from the Zohar, which says that matzah is called the food of faith, which is an interesting term. Faith is not something we usually think of as a food, and food is not something we talk about as faith. It's like two separate things, faith and food. How do you consume something called matzah and it increases your faith? So that's what we're going to tackle tonight. And we're going to come out with something, I think, very tangible and very clear and very understandable. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that the experience, this idea of being able to say mother or father, recognizing your mother or your father, what is when a child recognizes and says mommy or papa, and they call their mommy and they call mommy, mommy, mommy. What are they? Do they know? Laugh? What do they know about? Is it
just the way she was acting?
What do they really know about what a mother or a father is? Do they really know how much time the mother paid attention to the child? Then paid the 3 o'clock and the feedings and the diapers and all this other stuff. They understand how the mother and father made the child. Do they understand what the mother and father relationship is, and what a child real father doesn't know? But somehow the child recognizes that this is mommy. It doesn't really go into the depth of it, the understanding of it, but there's a recognition. And I'm telling you, it's not a fake recognition. Because when the child wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and screams, Mommy, she doesn't want anybody else. She doesn't want the older sister. She doesn't want the father. She wants the mommy. She wants the mommy. So she knows it's a mommy. She recognizes that's a mommy. You'd want her to be able to go give it to somebody else, because, hey, this woman can also take care of you. I don't want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the child is not going to take that as a substitute. That's mommy and that's not mommy. And I want the mommy. So there is something of a recognition. There is some sort of cognitive grasp that when a child starts to be able to say mother or father, that really grasps actually the core of what it is. Later on, it's like a seed. They have the seed of what it means to be a mother, and they know that's mother and that's father. And it develops as you are able to grow up and articulate what my mother did for me and the clothes I got and the other things, and they now took care of me and took me here and took me there. But you know what? Even the little baby, the innocent child, has a core recognition. And that's what we're getting at. A basic foundational understanding of what is mother. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains, and he says, that is also what is Emunah. That's what faith is about. It's a recognition of a transcendental reality. Just as my mother is my mother and nobody else is my mother, my God is my God, and that's it. It's not something I understand deeply. It's not under something I put into words, but it's the foundation on which everything else is done. And that is what faith is. Faith is not blind faith. Faith is not a leap of faith. Faith is about connecting to a certain level of energy of reality, that this is the truth, and and all the other stuff is just an add-on. It's an explanation of what I already know for fact. For example, you have a hand, a right hand, a left hand, and so forth. You never really question the fact, maybe that's somebody else's hand when I lift it up. It's my hand. I have faith. I know it is. It's a basic foundational understanding that and then I can explain what and how it's connected and stuff like that. But there has to be that core recognition. And that is what matzah is supposed to do for you. The Tzemach Tzedek, by the way, who sent this whole business, who introduced this idea of understanding faith by this idea of calling mother and father, there's an interesting story about him too. At one point in time, his mother passed away at a very young age, when he was a little baby. What, three? Three. And his grandfather took care of him, the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. And one time, the Tzemach Tzedek was sitting on the Alter Rebbe's lap, and he was playing with his grandfather's beard, how little kids do and so forth. And he was, and the grandfather decided to play a game with him. And he said, hey,
Who is Zadie?
Where is the Zadie? Where is grandfather? So the Tzemach Tzedek, 3 years old, said, here, I got him right here. Alter Rebbe says, no, that's the Zadie's beard. That's not him. So he points to the cheek. He points to the eyes. That's the eyes of the grandfather. That's the cheek of the grandfather. So the little boy, lost patience with this game because he couldn't come up with an answer, and he ran away. He went off and he started playing somewhere else. And then a few minutes later, all of a sudden, the grandfather hears a shriek. The boy has gotten his finger caught in the door, behind the door, the hinge and so forth, and he's yelling for his grandfather, Zadie, Zadie. The grandfather rushes over. What is it? What is it making look like? What happened? What happened? And then the Tzemach Tzedek goes, there is the Zadie. That's you. You came. It's a relationship. It's a connection. That is what we're talking about. It's hard to put into words, but there's a recognition and there's a relationship, and that relationship is true, and that's what faith is all about. It's about, just as you know that your mother is your mother and your hand is your hand, it's in your grandfather is your grandfather. I know it is. They don't have to explain to me how it is. I just recognize that that's the truth. It's my mother. It's my father. Okay. So why is this so important? Why is this relevant to us in our lives? And why is this connected to matzah? So the Tzemach Tzedek continues and he explains and he says, that is the effect of eating matzah on Pesach. Pesach gets us get back to that core understanding, that core realization that my mother is my mother, my father is my father, my God is my God, my hand is my hand, reality is reality, and I don't lose track, of it by all the other stuff. And that is an essential piece of how we liberate ourselves and get ourselves free. And here is, hold on tight, here's what he explains. Oh, but before we get to that, let's get to another little story. So the story goes is as follows. This was from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. He said there was a woman who used to be part of his class. She moved to Lakewood, and she sent a video. And in the video, it was about a cat, a little kitten. And this kitten happened to be in somebody's house, and they abused this kitten, and they treated it terribly. And eventually, it was rescued, and it was brought to another lady who had a lot of cats and older cats. And she set it up an older cat to be her surrogate mother, because this little kitten was very traumatized by the experience and would hiss and would screech and would make all sorts of sounds when anybody came near and any other cat came near. It was really heavily affected psychologically by the experience. So the video shows how one of these mother cats comes over as a surrogate and goes over to the little kitten, and immediately the little kitten starts hissing and screeching and making all sorts of noises. But the mother cat does exactly what they sort of teach in psychology classes about co-regulation. The mother cat doesn't take anything personally, goes over calmly, steps very slowly, approaches closer and closer to the kitten and so forth. And just by radiating a sense of calmness and of centeredness and of comfort, the little kitten picks up on this, and it also begins to be able to relax. And you can actually see in the video how the little kitten is all of a sudden is purring and is finally accepting this as a mother. Now, these are about animals. It happens quicker with animals. With human beings, it sometimes takes longer. When something terrible happens to a person and something completely throws them for a loop, either it's lack of sleep, it's some sort of tooth issue, it's some sort of other thing that comes up and throws you out of track. So we have these two energies inside of ourselves. In the Chassidus, they're called the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Behemis. The animal soul is constantly worried about survival, and when things start going wrong, and you lose money in the stock market, and you're losing in your and the health is something terrible happened in the health, we automatically. That animal soul communicates, and it communicates usually on an emotional level through fears, through anxiety, through yelling at the children, through this, through that, and so forth. It responds and it reacts because things are going south, and that's the way it reacts. But like an animal, it just instinctively reacts, and it's not a bad thing, actually. I'll explain that later. The godly soul is that mother cat, which is trying to explain to the little cat, is saying, you know what? God is in charge. It's okay. I understand that I'm not trying to explain to you. The mother cat didn't explain to the little kitten, you're a little kitten and now you're in a new house and, and everything. Didn't use words. It just used presence and calmness and being there. And it affected the little that if it was a language that the little kitten could understand. That is also what we need to do in order to be able to speak to our animal soul. Our animal soul is threatened, and on Passover we get faith, which means we are able to connect to God, to be able to understand that there is a bigger picture than what's going on, and there's holiness in this world. The Tzemach Tzedek explains it as follows. He says, the word for chametz is ches mem tzadik. The word for matzah is mem tzadik hey. If you heard carefully, you heard mem and tzadik are in both of those words. The only difference is between the hey and the hes. What is the difference between a hey and a hes? So a hay has a roof on the top and two legs on the bottom side. A hay is also a roof on the top and two legs on the sides. Except there's a little difference. In the hay, there's a little opening at the top. That's what we're talking about faith. You see, the animal soul always looks down, and it's always looking for self-preservation. And it's like that little kitten, and it's always worried about what's going to be with me and how I'm going to survive and what's going to happen with me and everything else. When you're always looking down, you're always afraid, you're always scared. Everything you made for a moment or two things might be going well. It's true, but the next day, something else will happen, and another thing will happen. You never know when everything is going to go south. So if the wrong person is going to get elected, something's going to happen, and all of a sudden, it seems like the whole world is crashing down around you. Because if you're always looking down and trying to get your support from the world, that's the nature of the world. The godly soul has a little opening on top. That is what faith is all about. It is about that opening to something higher than you. The higher than you is where godliness enters in and comes into the person. So the godly soul is able to talk to the animal soul, just like the mother cat. Talk to the soul in the way that it understands. To walk to the animal soul the way it needs to understand. You're okay. I understand. Tomorrow, I calm you down today. I may have to calm you down again tomorrow. Every day is another struggle. You have to work at this every single day. So I never know what is going to be the next day or this day or the next day or something like that. Every day is another opportunity to try and serve Hashem, because you get deregulated and you get scared, and therefore you have to reconnect to God, saying, you know what? Things are taken care of. You didn't make yourself. You didn't create yourself. You didn't create your life. You didn't make yourself healthy. You didn't give yourself arms and legs, and everything is going to be taken okay. It's really on Passover, the following happens to you. You know, the little child who knows that his mother is his mother does not necessarily have to understand everything about what the mother is doing. If the mother wants to go and take a trip, all I want is to go along. I know the mother is doing the right thing, and as long as she takes me along with her, I'm happy. That's the little child. The little child doesn't understand why we're going to Australia, why we're headed to New York, why we have to go to the store now. You know what? The little child is always happy and safe and secure because mommy's there. So he doesn't understand everything. That is what the core of the animal soul needs to understand from the godly soul. It has to know that there is a God who's taking care of you everywhere, just like the mommy, and never departs from you and never stops taking care of you. And that is what we ingest on Passover with the matzah, the food of faith, the humility, that openness. It's not chometz, it's matzah. It's open to something higher. And when you eat it, it internalizes that faith inside the person. And that is what we do. That's why we eat matzah on Pesach. And that's why we stay away from chometz on Pesach. Is because we don't want to be, otherwise we're trapped. We're trapped in that ches, we're trapped in looking down, we're no opening to above, nothing higher, transcendental, more transcendental truth. And emunah and faith is all about connecting to that transcendental truth that exists, that's bigger than us, because we're part of a mission that God has put us in this world to accomplish, and therefore there is nothing that can hurt us. There is nothing that can ultimately harm us, because ultimately everything is being orchestrated from above. And the emunah and the faith that we get by eating the matzah helps internalize that to that scared little that kitten that's inside of ourselves, which is constantly looking for a support from things that aren't necessarily going to help. Now, by the way, don't blame the kitten. Don't blame the animal. Animal is good. The animal soul basically responds to fearful things. So, you don't use your faith for the wrong thing. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once said that one of the tragedies about the Israeli political system is that the politicians use their faith to trust things that you're not supposed to trust. You have to use your mind too. Don't trust Arafat. He's a terrorist. Don't put your trust in him. Put your trust in God. And the politicians who did put their trust in Arafat were badly disappointed. So we don't put trust in things that are not true. We have to use our faith and our emunah for things that are transcendental, for believing in God, not in things like who's in charge of the government and who's in the press or any other kinds of stuff. That's not where we put our trust in. We don't put our trust in God, and He will act through them to be able to accomplish what needs to happen. So I hope that gives a little bit of overview of what it is when we talk about faith. It's not something stupid. It's something. It's a power. It's a power of the soul, a sense of the soul, the sixth sense of the soul that tells us what is truth, the transcendental truth, the truth that we just basically recognize who our mother is, who our father is, who our God is. And with that, my wife is going to give you an awesome, awesome story.
That was beautiful, Haskell Schumann. Thank you.
It's really
Beautiful.
awesome. Haskell Schumann, that was beautiful. Okay. So, and it's so nicely done. Okay, I'm going to tell a very brief story. And does anybody want to say something before I start? Yes.
You have a brilliant husband. You have a brilliant husband.
Okay. Sorry, you wanted to say something? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
I couldn't do it on my phone. I'm sorry I didn't come the past week. I couldn't get to my computer. I couldn't get to my phone because I was so busy at work. So I'm sorry I didn't come.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
I got a haircut for Yontif.
Good. I'm glad. Okay, good. So let's
Yeah.
begin, because
Okay, I'm gonna mute again because
I have a lot to do. I have a lot to do, and we all have a lot to do.
I know I said beeping. I said I'm gonna mute because there might be
Okay,
beeping.
good. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay, good. So, okay, I'm going to begin with the four things I always begin with. Number one, we're in an incredible time. We're in the unfolding of the redemption. The Lubavitcher Rebbe told us that, and he was never wrong about any public pronouncement, prophecy that he gave. They all came true, and this one's coming true. Number two, our souls were handpicked to be in this world at this time, because we have something, we each have an important role to play, each individual one of us. And number three, we were given all the tools that we need to navigate this time. We were given the Torah, which is our guidebook. We were given amazing teachings by our rabbis and Rebbitzins and Torah scholars, past and present, especially the Lubavitcher Rebbe, incredible stuff about how to navigate our times. And we were given the mitzvahs, which are unbelievable tools of transformation. They transform a person. That's what they do. You become the person you were always meant to be. You become stronger, just a completely different person. And finally, what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption, is the best way to speed it up. That's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. And let me add that the Rebbe told us also, he hinted broadly, multiple dozens of times, that he is Mashiach. Why didn't he say, I am Mashiach? Because in Jewish law, a king is not a king until he might be appointed already by God. A king can be like King David was appointed by God. He was anointed by the prophet of God, by Samuel. But he wasn't king until the people accept him. Ein melech below am. There's no king without a people. So even I think it was like 7 years after David was already picked by Hashem, then the people finally accepted him. So okay, so I wanted to tell a different story tonight, but it's going to be preempted by another story that I heard I'm going to save the other story for another time. So briefly, I'm going to make an introduction on what I wanted to say tonight previously, and that is, before we got out of Egypt, Hashem asked the Jewish people to do something. He rescued us. He gave he did the 10 plagues, and after the 10 plagues, he asked the Jewish people to step up to the plate. And do you know what he asked them to do? What was it that was very difficult that he asked them to do? Does anybody know? So now it's your turn. Step up to the plate.
Okay. To accept the Torah without knowing what's in it.
That's a good answer. But before then,
but it's not that holiday, right? We're talking about this holiday.
Yeah, on this holiday,
to believe, to trust him that we can come out of Mitzrayim, and even though we didn't know what was going to be there, to just trust that he'll take care of us. Because in Mitzrayim they had everything they're taken care of, and also it does say in the Chumash that like 4/5 didn't even come out, which
Absolutely.
whatever.
4/5 of the people didn't go out. They were just too stuck in a
Right.
slave mentality. But it's
So
not
I think that's what the
anymore.
answer is. I think that it's a very big, hard thing he asked us, saying, I know you don't know what's coming. You don't know what you're going to have. You're not living in your homes. You're just coming, and trust me
Going
that it's
into a
going to be
desert
okay.
with no water, no nothing. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
100%.
Well, they had animals. No, they had animals because they had a lot of things, because all the things they donated
Yeah.
to give to
No water,
to the.
no water. Only the bread that they took on their backs. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're
Okay.
right. No water.
Okay. Anyway, I'm
But they
gonna
had all the animals and all the riches, because they gave also for the Mishkan.
absolutely.
Just because those are
Absolutely.
the past 2 weeks in the
Absolutely.
Parsha, all we're talking about is the Mishkan,
That's-
so it's still in my head.
Yeah. Okay. So
They
here's
had
what I want to say.
gold.
Here's what I want to say. They shortly before they got out of there, Hashem said to the Jewish people, he told Moshe to tell the Jewish people that they should each take a lamb and tie it to their bedpost. And 4 days later, they should slaughter it in a kosher way and roast it outside their houses. Now, this was an incredible request on God's part. Why? Because the Egyptians worshipped lamb. They believed that lamb was Hashem. They worshipped sheep. And by this point, it's true the Egyptians were cowed by the Jews. They were cowed by this Hashem who had already given them 10 plagues. But it was still terrifying for the Jews to take this God of the Egyptians, tie it first for 4 days on to their bedpost, so the Egyptians can look in the window and say, "You've got my God tied up to your bed." And then Hashem didn't tell them to cook it in a nice little pot. He told them to roast it. You roast outside on a spit, the entire, not cut up, the whole. I mean, it had its entrails taken out, but it was in it after it was slaughtered. It was roasted whole. Now, if anybody knows anything about barbecues, they are the most fragrant things in the world. You can smell a barbecue you can't hide that you're making a barbecue. And Hashem said, I want you to make this public display that you don't believe in this stuff and you believe in me. And I have to say that the Jews did believe they did take on they lost a lot when they were in Egypt. They began worshiping like the Egyptians did. Many of them worshiped sheep, yeah. But Hashem said, no, I want you to be brave, and I want you to prove to yourselves, to the Egyptians, and to the world that this is not part of you anymore. That you are an adherent of Hashem. You stick to Hashem, and they did it. And it was nerve-wracking for them, but they did it. That was a big, 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 big thing that the Jews did. So every year before Pesach, we can do the same thing. We can think of something that that Hashem would like, and it takes it takes a little bit of just a small move to do it, but it's something that you don't usually ask of yourself. So something you do that Hashem dislikes, something you do that whatever. Each one of us has different things like that, and we put it on a spit and we roast it. And we say, Hashem, you don't like this? You don't like me to worship these things? I'm not going to do it. You don't like me to act in this way with this person? I'm not going to do it. You don't like me to flip out when something bad happens? I'm not going to do it. So you take a piece of yourself, you take a false belief and you roast it. And so that's a nice thing to do before Pesach. Okay, I'm going to go straight to the story for tonight. The story is about Reb Shalom Rubashkin. Now, Rubashkin, we should learn from the experience of Rabbi Rubashkin about what's happening now to the Jewish people. Now, I knew of the Rubashkin. The press roasted Shalom Rubashkin. It was a setup. It was a plan. They got, there's a whole anti-Semitic plan to stomp on him. He knew that the government was doing some kind of investigation. He said, so let's talk. And they said no. And they flew in helicopter. He said, I'll do whatever you want. No, they brought in media and flew in helicopters to close down his place. It was the most dramatic thing in the world. Threw him in prison, dragged him there, took away his sister, wouldn't let him do anything, and they they put like 400 counts of I forgot what it was. When you make kids work, what is it called? Uh, Whatever.
Child labor?
Yeah,
Child
child
labor.
labor, child labor. Thank you. A violation of child labor laws and all sorts of other things. I think they had 4,000 counts of something like that. They could not make a single thing stick. And and okay, I knew the Rubashkin family before this point. The Rubashkin family is one of the most remarkable families in the world. There's almost nobody like them, and him included. He's a prime player like this. What do? They help everybody. They help Jews and non-Jews. They when he grew up, this kid when he was a kid, what was his house like? In his house, they not only gave money to help the poor, they let the poor live with them. There was a bedroom for a kid and a bedroom for a homeless person. Then a bedroom for another kid, a bedroom for another homeless person, a bedroom for a kid, a bedroom from a homeless person. They ate together. They did everything. The parents had a restaurant in Borough Park, and all the people who had no money, they had a system where they would come and order, and then they would go up to the counter afterwards, and they would pretend to pay. And the people who worked at the counter knew that they don't take money from these people, but they went up to, so they wouldn't lose face. They're an amazing family. I worked for a women's yeshiva, and we turned away, and I was not a Lubavitcher, and we turned away people who were like a little weird or something. They didn't have such a good image. And I said to my employer, what's going to be with these people? They want to learn Torah. What's going to be with them? And my employer turned to me and said, there's always Lubavitch. Lubavitch never turns away anybody. And the Rubashkins are the epitome of Lubavitch. And he in Iowa, he was the same. He helped Jews and non-Jews. It was incredible. And anyway, it's just like what's happening to the Jewish people now. The Jewish people help the whole world, and nobody is vilified more than us. It's the exact same story, but we're going to be sprung just like he was sprung. In fact, well, I won't say that. Whatever. We're going to be sprung soon, in Meretz Hashem. So I'm going to tell a story about him when he was in prison. Now, that what did they finally get him on? They couldn't get him on any of the charges that they had intended. They couldn't get him on a single count of child labor. They couldn't get him on illegal aliens. They couldn't get him on any of it. There was no proof of anything. Finally, they were desperate, and they put him in jail for 28 years for violating a law that nobody has ever been prosecuted before in American history. It hasn't been prosecuted before for at least 100 years. They found, they said, you know what you did? You inflated your resources, that you inflated, what you have in order to get a bigger loan from, to keep your business going year after year, to get a big enough line of credit. This is an extraordinarily common practice. In fact, banks encourage people. They say, just a friend of mine, he said that's exactly what they told him at the bank. Just, pretend you have more assets and we can give you a bigger line of credit. It's a common practice in America. So they found that he did that. And so they threw him in jail for 28 years without, 28 years. Yeah. He was at that time when he was thrown in jail, I was working for another Jewish organization. There was somebody in that Jewish organization that ran a Jewish newspaper. He was very big in a Jewish newspaper that really didn't like Lubavitch. And so when Shalom Rubashkin landed in jail, he thought, I'm going to cover this. We don't believe in all this stuff Lubavitch does. And he flew out to wherever it was where he was in jail to interview him. He came back He said, this is not a person. This is an angel. He is not a human being. He is an angel. I never met anybody like him in my life. And today, or at least the last time I heard about him, he was this guy who originally hated Lubavitch is learning Tanya, which is the classic Lubavitch book of philosophy. Anyway, so this story happened in the last year that Lubavitch, he was supposed to be there 28 years. This happened in the 8th of those 28 years. And it was, he did outreach to all the Jews and non-Jews in the prison. And on the Seder, he made a Seder. And he invited people to come and ate. Okay, there was him, and there were, on his right, there were, sitting at this big table, there were 5 Torah observant Jews who came to his Seder. And there were 3 Jews who didn't know Moses from Adam, right? There were 3 Jews who didn't know Moses from Adam, and 5 Torah observant Jews. And they got, they were in the middle of the Seder, the big talking part, the part called Magid, where you tell Magid is to tell, and you tell the story of how we got out of it. We tell the story. Everybody tells it. Everybody says the Haggadah. And no matter how old you are, we say it. And even if you're alone, you say it. You say it out loud. You're saying it for yourself and for Hashem. So when they got to Magid, there's a part in Magid called V'nitza Ek. Not so I have to get my Haggadah. It means, and we cried out. It's telling the story of the slavery was so bad, and at first. I'll tell. There's a medrash that says, "Excuse me, what was Hashem doing all that time? They suffered for a long time before Hashem sent Moses to save them. What was Hashem doing? Didn't Hashem see? Yes, Hashem saw. Hashem saw. Absolutely, Hashem saw. But there's a medrash that said, what did they do? They were They had forgotten about Hashem. They spent that time just complaining about their lot to each other, and to themselves, to each other. Isn't it awful? Isn't this terrible? Isn't this awful? And at a certain point, Hashem allowed the slavery to get so bad that the Jewish people remembered Hashem, and it said, I have to get the correct pronunciation, and they cried out to Hashem. All of a sudden, they remembered Hashem. As soon as they cried out to Hashem, Hashem contacted Moses. Moses wasn't in Egypt; he was in Midian, a nearby country. And there's a long story about why he was there, but he was in a nearby country, and Hashem said, go. You have to go back to Egypt, and I'm going to help you, and you're going to take the Jewish people out of there. So as soon as we called out, Hashem responded. So Shalom Rubashkin explained to all the people at his Seder, he said, when we say B'nitzat, I have to get it. Sa'ak is to cry out. Nitza ek, I guess it is. When we cried out, the nun in front of the word means we cried out. When we say that, when we say that, we cry out to Hashem from our own heart, then the skies are open, and it's an ace ratzon. It's a favorable time in heaven. And so he turned to everybody and he said, this is what we should do. Let's pause here. And when we say this, let's cry out with all our hearts to Hashem that we're going to get out of here this year. We're getting out of prison this year. This is it. And immediately, the 3 not observant Jews stood up to join him, and the 5 observant Jews, Torah observant Jews, just sat there. And Shalom Rubashkin turned to them and he said, "Don't you want to do this?" And one of the guys said, "I'm not going to do it. There's no reason to cry out. My fate is sealed. I'm supposed to. The judge said 8.5 years, and I still have 5 years to go. My fate is sealed. There's nothing that's going to get me out of here sooner." And he turned to another guy, and the other guy said, "Yeah, I just talked to my lawyer. My lawyer said we exhausted every possibility. There's nothing. There's no reason to. I'm not going to do it either." And he turned to another one. And and the other one said, "You know what? I tried davening. I'm still here. I'm not going to do it. So Shalom Rubashkin and the three guys who are not Torah observant started they said V'nitza ik. They screamed out to Hashem. They screamed out with all their heart and soul, Hashem, get us out of here. We need to be out this year. And like the walls were shaking. It was so powerful what they did. That was in April, right? Pesach is in April. In December, on the last day of Hanukkah, Trump pardoned Shalom Rubashkin and the three guys who stood up with him. All of them were sprung the 8th day of Hanukkah. And anyway, the rabbi that I heard the story from said, today, those three guys they're fully Torah observant. They got the message that Hashem can perform miracles, and we have to trust in Him, and we have to cry out to Him. So when we get to Nitz az, oh yeah, I'm gonna get it. So Aik is to scream out, so it must be Nitzachek, yeah, no, Nitzach with an iron. Okay, fine. So let's do it. Let's do it this year. Let's cry out at that point in the Seder. It's in Magid, in the section called Magid, and let's do it. And meantime, I'm going to let's give it all we got. So I'm going to wish all of you a wonderful Pesach. We will have a class in Mirz. I don't know. No, we won't have a class because next week we won't have a class because the second day of Pesach ends on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's not going to end till like past 8 o'clock, the second day of Yantif. You remember that Yantif is this year is 3 days long. First, there's a Shabbos that precedes Pesach. And so you have to have everything done before Shabbos. And Pesach begins Saturday night after dark. And then Sunday night, then Sunday night is the second night, and the Yontif part goes all the way till Monday when it gets dark, and then we have Chol Hamoed, which are the intermediary days. And if you have not, the most important thing is to get rid of your chametz. And if you have not done it so far, go to Chabad.org and right on the title page, you'll see something called Sell Your Chametz. It doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost a penny. There's no such thing as a penny anymore. Well, it's going out of business, but it doesn't cost anything. It takes moments and you're done. And it is a huge spiritual baggage that is lifted off of you. It is a tremendous prohibition to own chametz on Pesach. And although you can sell it to a non-Jew, there's so many technicalities that it's better to do it through Chabad.org because they know all the technicalities that you might not know. And it's a big thing to do the Seder on both nights. And even if you live alone, you do the Seder. And who's listening? Hashem is listening. He's your partner. And it's a big thing to eat matzah. And it's a big thing for a Jew to have shmura matzah. That the round one that's made from guarded. Shmura means guarded. It's made from wheat that was guarded from ever getting wet. From the moment of harvest, it never got wet. It never had a chance to hametz, to start to ferment. It never had a chance. And you're all invited, of course, to our house, and we'd love to have any and all of you. And let's see, is there anything else that's very big? Selling your chametz, eating the matzah, and saying the Haggadah, saying the story of Pesach. It's huge to say the story of Pesach. And I'm going to wish everybody a good night. I just broke my tooth, so I was running around trying to find something to fix it until I can get to a dentist on Wednesday. So I didn't do any of my normal stuff, so I have to get off. So I'm going to stop right now.